So with the recent updates to Apple's iPad range as well as the price drop for iPad 10, it gives us a good idea on what to expect with iPad 11, which we should still be getting later this year. So let's discuss everything we know. First things first, I am very glad we can at least expect the iPad 11 to be $349. That was probably the only upgrade I wanted, since we all know how overpriced the iPad 10 was at release, and so my previous iPad 11 videos, I made it clear I wanted a price cut before any hardware changes with this new base iPad. I didn't care about a new chip, I didn't care about display upgrades, I just demanded a bloody price cut, and oh boy was I glad that my G Timothy gave us just that. And actually, before Apple themselves surprised us with the price cut for iPad 10, Gurman had hinted a lower price was coming to iPad 11. In a huge report he dropped weeks before the iPad event, he mentioned, and I quote, "The new entry-level iPad will probably be a cost-reduced version of the iPad 10 from 2022. And well, when I read this, I was tingling everywhere like this. But anyways, taking into context the iPad 10 has got a price cut, some of you guys may be wondering, does that mean the iPad 11 could get cheaper? He does technically say it's a cost-reduced version of the iPad 10, which is $349 right now, so could we expect another cheeky price cut? Could it drop down to the old $329 price tag? I don't think so. Don't get your hopes up for that, because the fact Apple brought down the iPad 10 to $349 was big news in itself, and a $20 increase over the iPad 9 for the new design isn't too bad, especially when you factor in inflation. So the iPad 11 should stay at $349, and I'm completely fine with that. You know what else I would be fine with? You subscribing to the channel, of course. I would greatly appreciate it and would bring you the latest about Apple right to your subscription box, so please consider it. It would be appreciated. We're trying to hit our next milestone of 16,000 subscribers, so join the Surround Byte gang now. So that's pricing out of the way, but let's now delve into what's actually different with the iPad 11, and that's where we have some confusing tidbits. You see, Macroom has sifted through technical information posted by private accounts who have been credible in the past on the Twitter streets, and they suggested the next base iPads would keep the A14, which makes no sense whatsoever. I guess there is a possibility they give us more RAM whilst keeping the A14, but I have my doubts about that considering Apple currently doesn't produce any products with the A14 and 6 gigs of RAM. In fact, only the 12 Pro had that configuration, but of course, it's been long discontinued, and the iPad 10 only got the A14 in the first place because it was recycling the iPhone 12's motherboard with the same A14 and 4 gigs of RAM that of course they were still selling in 2022. Yes, Apple can do literally anything they want at the end of the day, but their entry-level products are usually recycle bin devices, so whatever parts are still being produced, they chuck it in here to lower the production cost. That's how Timothy is a logistics mastermind. And yes, I know the iPad 6 and the 7 did share the same A10 chipset, so this would not be the first time a new base iPad has simply carried over the same chipset, but at least with the iPad 7, instead of a new chipset, we got a bigger display. The iPad 11 definitely won't be that exciting, especially considering the iPad 10 was a major redesign. So I'm gonna go against the leakers, which I know is a horrible idea usually, because I'm just a guy on YouTube blabbering on aimlessly, but my gut feeling is saying we either get the A15 or the A16 with the iPad 11. Why I think there's a teeny weeny chance we get lucky with an upgrade to A16 is because this will be the first base iPad in nearly 2 years, and so to me skipping over the A15 and using A16 alongside 6 gigs of RAM makes the most sense. But let's see if Timothy is going to be that generous. But regardless of whether we get a new chipset or not, I can definitely see them adding Wi-Fi 6E since that's now come to the iPad Air 6. Now, yes, most don't have Wi-Fi 6E routers to take advantage of the better speeds, but I'll take the new spec for future-proofing reasons, since eventually Wi-Fi 6E is going to become the standard. I know some might also want Apple to bring over the new 128GB base storage option from iPad Air 6 to the new base iPad, but I think that will be the key differentiator between these models. Once you consider paying more for the 256GB base iPads, you might as well consider the iPad Air, and then of course eventually Apple's gonna upsell you to a shiny new iPad Pro. It's all part of their mastermind plan, and so I don't see any storage upgrades coming to the iPad 11. It's staying at 64 gigs, is gonna benefit Apple ultimately. And if I'm being honest guys, at the end of the day, I think most regular consumers only care about some new fancy colors, so I'm sure that's all Apple has to do to sell these. The iPad 10 originally was a horrible value at $450, but I saw many buying that over older superior iPads, just because it came in a fancy pink, blue, or yellow, so I'm sure Apple can just resell the same products again by replacing them in even fancier colors. So yes, the iPad 11 is going to be a very minor upgrade, but the base iPad rarely gets big changes. Apart from the iPad 10, every other model was kinda just a spec refresh for the most part, and so now that this has the modern iPad design language, it's gonna go back to regular spec updates, and that's completely fine. In fact, the iPad 10 is actually kind of perfect as is for $350, so we're no longer in dire need of a refresh because of the price cuts. Now you still may be wondering about the release of iPad 11, so let's quickly talk about that. Like Minchiko recently mentioned, a report from Nikkei Asia also does suggest the iPad 11 won't be releasing till the second half of this year, and since we aren't expecting any hardware WWDC, we're likely going to see this in September with iPhone 16. That would make a lot of sense considering the iPad 7, 8 and 9 all launched in September at the iPhone event. The 10 was a weird exception and released a little later, but I think it makes sense to go back to the September schedule. Anyways, engineering verification for test production of the iPad 11 did start in mid-February. I'm assuming that all went smoothly, and so of course they can now mass produce them a few months prior to release. And so yes, everything lines up for a September release, and so yeah, there is still a few months to go, but as I said, with the iPad 10's recent price cuts, I'm no longer begging on my knees for Apple to release this immediately. I also want to mention that similar to the actual iPad, the Magic Keyboard Folio should really get a price cut. It's kind of weird to me, they're selling a keyboard that's only $100 cheaper than the actual iPads, and so drop that to $149 or $199 at the very least, and also maybe offer a black option, because we already know how horribly the white cloth material ages. Of course, I was originally not happy with the pencil situation on the base iPads, since you had to mess around with a stupid dongle to connect the first gen pencil, but now we have the USB-C pencil, which of course works like higher end models for the most part. There is a chance they add support for Apple Pencil Pro to this iPad by internally rearranging some of the front-facing camera components, but the chances are very low considering they want to upsell you to the higher end models, and the better pencil is a big reason to get the Air Pro instead. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching. So now that the M2 Air has been released, it's really made the older M1 Air a terrific deal, as it's of course now been discontinued and it often goes on sale for $399, and so let's talk about how this is a great buy in 2024. So why do I like the M1 iPad Air so much?